Check 1, 2. Hello there, good afternoon. It is Tuesday, April 8th, and my name is Rob, Developer Dad, and we're working with C# and .NET to extend the capabilities of the DM's Familiar. So what I started in on late last week was kind of determining what some of these game content things that we want to manage would look like. And I had stuffed them into the Game Tools Framework class library project. And I decided that it probably made much more sense for me to give all of these models their own project. So I created TDMF for the DM's Familiar.GameContent.models. And we've got our base game content model here. It's just an abstract class with a bunch of properties on it that are common to all models. I stood up a base location and a base narrative element and filled in all of these specific kinds of locations that we can create and specific kinds of narrative elements, all the way down to a narrative event base. But I haven't taken that narrative event base to plot change or plot advancement, encounter, trap, RP event kind of thing, or non-combat skill check or what have you. I haven't extended that out into its child classes yet because I want to get the basic object management stuff down first. All of this, of course, is building towards a in-session, basically an initiative tracker. And it occurred to me that, well, if you're going to be organizing things into sessions, then chances are you're playing a campaign or at least a multi-session adventure, and you're going to want to be able to group all of these different encounters into some sort of cohesive structure. So I came up with all of these structures. Now, yesterday, I continued working on the detailed design and the storage concepts, and I've actually got a rudimentary access component designed, and we've got just this basic iGameContent access. It's got one thing that just filters our game content by the author ID. That's the only filter criteria that we're going to use right now. But we're going to build a much more rich filtering system very soon. And then, of course, I've attached that to location access and narrative element access and eventually narrative event access once I've got those defined. And something that I'm doing differently here than I've done elsewhere is because we've got this sort of object hierarchy, this inheritance hierarchy from top-level game content down to location, narrative element, or narrative event. And then, of course, we've got all of the concrete subtypes underneath each of those. I realized that I could do some fancy stuff when it comes time to actually build these access classes. And because I did these as generic interfaces, and the generic constraint on the interface is where T of our location access is either location base or anything that inherits from location base. That gives us a lot of power, because what I'm able to actually do here is I've implemented save on the location access, and it's actually super duper simple. All we do is we turn whatever comes in as type T into a storage model, and I'm doing some nifty stuff there too. And then we get our table client because we're using Azure Tables. We call the upsert against that table client, and then we just convert the entity back to our model and send it back as the result payload. So let's take a look at what toStorage model looks like. Oh, come on, don't be a doofus. It's in location converters. So toStorage model, all it does is it creates a new location table entity, which is a private, or it's a storage model that's private to the game content access Azure Table Storage assembly. And it just creates this storage model of all of the common properties that exist up to and including the properties encapsulated by the location base class. Now, for all of the properties that exist on the child classes of location base, like the properties on world, continent, country, national region, and so on out to the smallest kind of location, those all have, or most of those have their own discrete properties that only exist for those objects. So rather than stand up discrete tables for each of those kinds, what I decided to do is serialize, or rather, come on, let's come down to get details JSON. Where are you? There's toModel and all of the private methods for those. To settlement. Rehydrating is a little bit more involved. But to get the details, what we do is we create a dictionary keyed on a string type, which is the name of the property, and then a nullable object to hold the value of the property. Hey, C-Films, we go and find all of the leaf properties on our model type. So let's go to the definition on this guy. And this method, all it does is it gets the properties from whatever type of model we're dealing with that are declared and public and instant, or instance properties, which means on something like, say, the settlement class, these would be considered our leaf properties: the settlement kind, the settlement government type, and the map reference. All of the other properties that are inherited, because it inherits from location base, which in turn inherits from game content base, all of those aren't counted as leaf properties. The only properties I care about for this are the ones that, I don't know what I changed in here. I'm just going to delete that, save it. Where is my location access? Come on. Stop. Come on. Jiminy Christmas. Here's location access. The only ones I care about are those leaf properties, so to speak. And it's location converters where I was playing. And then we return the collection of those, and all we do on the get details JSON is we loop through the properties, add the name of the property as the key on our dictionary of details, and then the value from the actual model instance property. We stuff that into the value of that dictionary, and we serialize the dictionary out to JSON, which gets attached to the actual storage model on the location details JSON. Now, I've tested this on the world type and the settlement type. Those are the only two that I've actually implemented the build me a thing scripts for in my console test harness. But you can see here that my console test harness has in fact created 3 locations for me. And I should be able to, let's just refresh this, because the UI is being a little goofy. And we'll come into locations, and here's my scroll bar. There. Submit and close. Go away. You can see there's my author user ID, content category is location, created date is today, description, the ID for the actual location, and I should make sure that those IDs match the row keys, and they do. And then the location details JSON, as well as the location type name and the name of the location, the actual name for the location. The name comes from the game content object. The description comes from the location base, and location details JSON gets created at the access layer. So we can edit this, and we can actually look at this JSON. And we see settlement kind, capital city, government type, Council of Four High Kings, map reference, it's on the inside cover of the books. It's also found in Quentin's head. Cool. We've been watching The Magicians again. We watched it years ago, and I recently got the itch to watch it again, and Mrs. was more than happy to watch it again with me. We just finished the series. Project's coming. I'm not able to work on it as much as I have been in the past, or up to now, because I've been doing subcontracting work for somebody, typically between 15 and 20 hours a week. So my mornings are dedicated to that. But that actually also comes with a paycheck. So yeah, it's kind of slowed things down, and the DM's familiar, but I'm actually making pretty decent progress, because I'm doing some fool around and find out with some of the coding structures, some of the ways I'm doing things, and yeah, it's coming together fairly quickly. Maintainability and scalability of the project is, I have had no problems with either. I'm not so worried about being able to scale to number of users yet. By the time I have enough users where scaling is a consideration, I've designed the solution and the overall service and the system itself in a way that I've got all kinds of flexibility as far as how to scale. Right now, I'm at the lowest hosting tier, the lowest paid hosting tier that you can buy on Azure. And if I have to upgrade that, it means I've got enough users that upgrading it is not, that scaling up isn't going to be an issue. If I need to scale out, same thing. I'm not using sessions, so I could run multiple copies at this lower tier and not run into problems with that. If I need to split the application, like the web server application, into multiple services that can be scaled independently, that's also going to be relatively painless, because I've actually designed and built the server side of things as a modular monolith. So if I decide all this game content stuff really ought to be in its own API project, I can do that without any pain at all. Does that answer your question? And the maintainability, I can snap new features into this thing as I write them. As a matter of fact, I'm doing that right now. So what I want to be able to do here is I want to test all of the different types of locations. I've got a game content test harness here, and I've basically, inside of that, I've stood up the ability to open just a scripts class, and all the script class does is it implements a couple of methods, one for create new, and it's just a series of console prompts to say, give me a name for the settlement, enter a description, it just asks questions, records my answers, and then sends it off to the data access layer to test the insert and the create and so on. Super easy, super silly. I don't care how. I don't care. The code is not really great modular or anything like that. This is a console app for me to test the actual components I'm building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to vibe code this thing to completion, and I'm going to say at codebase, please identify the classes in tdmf.gamecontent.models/locations that inherit from location base and have not yet been given an iContent test script implementation in the content type scripts namespace of the game content test harness project. Howdy, Plusser 27. Settlement scripts, looking for code excerpts provided. Settlement inherits from location base and has an implementation. In the provided code base content to definitively identify other location classes that inherit from location base but lack test script implications. Access to. All right. At workspace, can you address the prior response? C# does do a lot under the hood when you're working with files. Are you talking about like coding against the file system, or are you talking about just like adding new files to a C# project or what have you? Video 0, lines for video. Oh gosh, yeah, I've not even attempted to write anything in Go. I'm curious about it, but yeah, I think in C# to do that, you would basically just open the file as a stream and pull it in and read the data that way. I've not done anything with video editing or programmatic video manipulation. All right, it doesn't want to do. It's not getting what I'm trying to do here. Vibe coding fail. So what I'm going to do here is instead of that, I'm going to take a look at this. I'm going to pop this open in the Finder just so that I can see the list of types, because I've got one type per class file here. And I am just going to shrink this up and new file, class. That's handy plus. All right, I've created world and settlement, so I need continent scripts. I need country scripts. I need national region scripts. Let's add point of interest. Structure. There we go. So for context, we're going to add all of the open editors on the stubbed location type scripts.cs files. Please add the appropriate implements content test script. Implementation directive. Cool. Yeah, apply that. Do that thing. ChatGPT doesn't know how to count, see films. ChatGPT, most of the publicly available free models can't do math and cannot reason. All right, so that's a decent basic thing. But I need to, let's add context. And how about a folder? Source, no. Add context. Prompt symbol, terminal last command. Folder. That's not what I want to do. How about a project? We do that. Point of interest. I'll just do this. Continent, country, national region, point of interest, settlement structure, world are already square. Good stuff. We'll update program.cs later once we have the other location scripts files filled in. Oh, absolutely. A word of advice from one who's done quite a bit of work integrating generative AI into traditional imperative code. If you can do it with traditional code, you should do it with traditional code. Like, why would you ask an AI, like, pass a large chunk of text into AI to count the number of words or the number of characters or what have you in that chunk of text when you can write a method that does exactly that and doesn't come with a token cost or an API call cost to a remote API or what have you. I've seen people try to get ChatGPT to act as a random number generator, and I'm like, why? You can write a random number generator in a half an hour, and then it doesn't cost you anything to actually execute it. But if you write a prompt to generate, a random number between 1 and 20, you're paying every time you invoke that method. And it just doesn't make sense to me why people would delegate that kind of thing off to GPT. It it just boggles my mind that people think that's actually an acceptable way to build systems. Like, when it comes to automation, you let the computer do what the computer's good at. You let the language model do what the language model is good at, and you let the imperative code do what it's best at. It's all about using the most appropriate tool for the job. It's like using a language model to count the number of characters in a string is like using a chainsaw to trim your fingernails. It feels weird to me that people think that's a good idea, or perhaps even efficient. Um, oh yeah, commit messages. I let Copilot do that for me all the time. I don't bother with character counts or anything like that. Are you using GitHub Copilot, or are you using a different IDE? C Films, something like Rider or whatever. Because Copilot lets me choose, and as soon as I saw I could use Claude, I absolutely flipped over to Claude. So here, I don't know if I can zoom in, but if you look, I've got my Copilot window right here. And if you look right down here, you see that I've selected the Claude 3.5 Sonnet model as the reasoning model that I want to use. And now there's a whole pile of new models that I could try. I'm just going to stick with 3.5 for now. But when I'm on, you know what? I'm going to do this. Let's try the 3.7 Sonnet Thinking, just for laughs. We're going to go edit. Yes. All right. Let's add content. All of my open editors. Please inspect the files that are named with some location type scripts.cs that are currently only stubs. Look at the world test scripts, settlement scripts, and point of interest scripts for the patterns to use, then implement any remaining script classes appropriately. Yeah, I'm using VS Code as my text editor. Basically, it's my full IDE at this point. I've got the C# developer kit installed, which gives back a lot of the things that are missing from that I don't have natively in Visual Studio Code that do live in full-on Visual Studio. And while it works, I'm just going to go through these and say, yeah, keep that. It's updating national region scripts. It's working. This one will keep. And let's do that. Okay. S. Now. Awesome. Done. We'll add context. Open editors. For the files in the content type script namespace, please look at the classes that are being used as the generic type parameter, and make sure that in the create new methods on each class that we're collecting any properties that exist on those generic type parameter classes. Vibe code this, suckers! It helps if you can speak computer to the LLM, especially when you get into this vibe coding nonsense. I can't imagine being able to. Settlement scripts class. Settlement scripts is already there. Don't do that. It's already here. Population? Population is not. Okay, we're going to undo that. Okay, stop. We're going to undo all of these changes that it's doing. Okay. Let's try that again. And I'll do a better job of describing my intent for each of the iContent test script implementations. I need you to inspect the generic type parameter class for the specific implementation, and then add additional console prompts to the create new method for any properties on the return type that are not already being collected in the create new method. Please do not make up new properties for those data classes. Let's try this again. So GitHub made some changes late last week over the weekend to make Copilot a lot more eager than it was before. And I'm not sure that I love how all of these things are new. So I'm very curious to see what these these test scripts come out looking like. So let's take a look at world test scripts. So it's still it's making up new properties. We're going to zap that. Let's see what it did with content. See, not what I want you to do. Just stop. Are you done? Undo all of that. Yes, stop it. I'm going to open settlement script so it stops trying to create it for me. Okay. On that last attempt, you were adding new properties to the create new methods when those properties do not exist on the classes that we are creating. Please add new prompts only for those properties on the concrete classes that we don't already have console prompts for. Start with point of interest scripts rather than trying to update all of them. Let's get my intent correct first, then we'll repeat. And what we're going to see from this exercise is I probably could have implemented the changes that I want in less time than it's taken me to sweet talk the LLM into doing what I want it to. There we go, step-by-step solution. Now, let's take a look at point of interest scripts. Location ID, we don't need that. That can go away. Let's pop open point of interest. Now, we're going to undo that change. Add context, all open editors. Let's try that again for point of interest scripts. But this time, refer to its actual class file and add the code to create new to populate the properties that are declared on the point of interest class itself. Ignore any properties that are inherited. Point of interest class file, identify its own properties. Prompts for the specific properties, maintain the existing code structure and style. Let's see what it does for us this time. We've added point of interest kind and map reference, and we are going to keep it. Perfect. Before we do the rest of these scripts classes, should I open the backing types as well? Or can you access that context by looking at the workspace? Template folder. Oh, for UI elements, for templated things on the pages. Okay, then I'm going to do this. All open editors. Okay. How's that? There's got to be a better way than just attaching individual files. Specific properties defined in each model class. Settlement scripts already includes all the necessary prompts. Frickin' beautiful. I'm just going to let it do its thing. And then I'm going to review each. Okay. So you're building templates for sort of UI element structure part, right? So let's keep this. We're into the country scripts, country kind, government type, national region. We have region type, regional government type, climate type. Cool. Save. Now, I want to take a look at program. Oh, look at this. We've got all these things. That's a thing of beauty. Cool. Is there a more efficient way I can provide context to you than having potentially dozens of open editors, especially when you might need to look around the entire code base for imported types. So something I've noticed when working with copilots or GPTs or whatever, repository search results, project structure overview, simple list of class-specific properties for each model would have been sufficient rather than seeing the entire implementation. Let's say done. Okay. So let's close everything out. Close others. Save the changes? Yeah, save them. And I'm going to rebuild everything. And let's add a new file. It's going to be a class. And it's going to be Saga scripts. We're going to open iContent types, or iContent test scripts, root folder, image, CSS, JS, query functions, templates. Okay. And do you have templates defined for the different kinds of things that you display repeatedly on your site? You're working in PHP, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Image, CSS, JS, query functions, templates. Yeah, that's a decent level of organization. Do you find what I think you probably want to think about using templates for is when you notice that you've got a lot of structures that are identical to each other except for the actual value that's plugged in and rendered out to the screen inside each element. Because PHP, you're just script producing the HTML file that's fed down to the browser, if I'm not mistaken, right? Using world test scripts as a model to crib from. Oh, we can't do this yet because we actually need to create the narrative element access. So before I do this part, I'm going to pop open resource access. That makes sense. It's just I like to use templates and classes and modules and stuff like that for oh, I spelled that wrong. For things that I want to reuse frequently so that I don't have to end up typing the same crap over and over and over again, because that drives me insane. Rename symbol. And I also tend to segregate things out from the main code base if they change frequently. And if I find that I've got something that I reuse over and over and over again, that is that's reused across a lot of different places and changes frequently, that's usually the first place I go when I'm looking to optimize an existing code base that I own. And I try to get my repeatable fragments down to so that I can only answer yes to one of the questions. The two important questions being, is this code used all over the place? And does this code change a lot? If the answer to both of those questions is yes, that means I need to concentrate on it and really kind of decompose it more thoroughly until it's been broken into two or more discrete artifacts where I can only answer yes to one of those two questions. Now, oh, absolutely. Your file structure, okay, there's a disconnect between, in my opinion, there's a disconnect between simple and easy. Simple does not always necessarily mean easy. You see my folder structure. I've got dozens of folders, projects, class libraries, so on and so forth. And I probably don't need this much separation or segmentation in my code base. But having things laid out the way I've got them may be more complex, but it's much simpler to think through in my head because of the way I've got things named, structured, so on and so forth. Like all of my access to remote resources could be stuff stored in Azure storage account, a database, a remote API, a file somewhere. It could even be hard-coded data that exists as constants in a class library in terms of the 5e SRD rule set that I've got implemented in here. Those are all resources. And as you can see, I've got quite a lot of stuff in here. And I've actually got, for each resource, I've got a few different, couple of different libraries. For instance, these abstractions, or the ones that don't have anything after them, they're just interfaces and data models. Just the public face of that access component. And then I'll append a technology-specific name when I implement these abstractions against a specific technology. So for instance, the admin API, I've got the iAdmin access. These methods are implemented as against an HTTP provider by just making API calls. Early on in the DM's familiar, I had NPC access. I had a SQL Server implementation. And then I wanted to switch that over to using Azure Tables for cost and efficiency and performance reasons. So I didn't have to rewrite everything from scratch because I already had the behaviors and the data types defined. So all I did was re-implement the behaviors using the pre-existing data types against Azure Tables instead of SQL Server, and I named that batch of code npcaccess.azuretables. And so I know in here, it's all Azure Table specific stuff for getting at the NPCs. Just like Azure Table Storage access to the game content. And then these are the abstractions, which are just the definitions of the behavior and the publicly exposed types that's owned by the access components. My engines, these guys do all the compute and figuring stuff out. Managers combine the different behaviors exposed by engines and resource access to stitch all of the different little core capabilities together into an actual process that provides some end user activity or some activity that the system needs to expose. And then my API stitches managers together, combining these use case or activity implementations into encapsulated processes that are then exposed to the UI. So yeah, I do things in a very, very different way than is necessarily evident for, say, a PHP developer or somebody that's doing that kind of thing. The subcontracting work that I'm doing is a very classic ASP.NET Core entity framework, basically forms and grids over data, where we don't have this gigantic, this complex structure. And yes, the call chain is very, very shallow. I would add folders to the CFilms project whenever you think it makes sense to group the files that would go into that folder together. If it's an independent component or if it's a specific purpose or what have you, that's when I would add folders. Now, if I were experienced with PHP, I'd probably have a completely different statement and completely different advice. You've been working with PHP for quite some time, I'm going to assume. So, I mean, you know, take my thinking as with a huge grain of salt. All right, so narrative element table entity. I want to give this thing the context of the narrative element base class. I also need to give it the game content base class. And we've got, so what I'm going to do is we're going to vibe this class together. We're going to add context with all of my open editors. I'd like you to implement the stubbed narrative element table entity class. Use the location table entity class as a template, but take the properties for the narrative element entity from the game content base and narrative element base classes. Don't forget a string property for the, what did I call it? Narrative element details JSON when constructing this new, or when implementing this new class. I noticed that I have to be a whole lot more explicit with 3.7 Sonnet thinking. Okay. Yeah, an MVC is really, really great for, basic forms over data where you're implementing a CRUD style, create, read, update, delete, or in the case of the visitors to your site, filter and read. Narrative, parent location ID, yeah. I'm just going to say keep. So this does not want to inherit game content entity base. Unless I'm actually doing that up here. Oh, I am. Okay. Narrative type name, description, parent location ID, parent narrative ID. We don't need these. Those are going to be inferred. Partition key prefix as narratives. I can zap those. Row key, ID to set. Groovy. All right, that looks pretty good. I quite like that. Yeah, I really don't mind MVC structure, like the model view controller. I find that sometimes it can get a little bit, it gets a little bit easy to bloat the controllers with way too much functionality. When I've done MVC, I've actually treated the controllers or the controller classes as, say, the API layer. And I've actually created managers to stand up the different activities that are performed on the UI, so on and so forth. Let's let it take a stab at I don't need to alter the abstractions. Let's add a class. Called narrative element access. And it is going to implement narrative element access of T, not task, but T. Actually, let's just do this. Yeah. And I'm going to pop open location access. Using the location access class as a template, please implement the narrative element access class. will add a narrative element converters class later. Now, after this attempt, I think I'm going to switch away from Claude 3.7 Sonnet thinking to just 3.7 Sonnet. I already have that. Stop. I'm sorry, I forgot to add the open editors. Let me do that, and you can try again. Add context, open editors. I'm going to take program CS out of there. Location access, narrative element access. Narrative element table entity. Okay, cool. Go. Let's see what it can do here. Add constructor and private fields. Implement methods for CRUD ops and filtering. Let's see what it does. Yeah, perfect. Keep. Now we've got a little bit of grump code, and it's probably because the two storage model and two model methods don't exist. Well, let's find out. Where is the grouch code? Table client, build table client, that's delete. This is create table if not exists. Okay. Delete. This is filter. Here's load. And the save is probably where the grumpy stuff is. Entity. Yep. And that is perfect. Good stuff. Well done. Give me a sec, and I'll bring in the location converters and create the narrative element converters extensions class for you. And you can take a swing at that. So we're going to need to pop open location converters. And I'm going to need to add a new file called narrative element converters. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and add using tdmf.gamecontent.models.narrative. And let's go ahead and add saga, story arc, story, chapter, we'll add all open editors. Here's our narrative element converters. And do we have location converters open? We do. Okay. Using location converters as a template, please implement narrative element converters. Do we have the narrative element table entity? We do. As an extension class, I've attached the different narrative element child types we'll be dealing with to the context for your reference. And this is going to be the last thing I do here. If this works out and I'm able to resolve the angry code out in the narrative element access class, I'm going to call this a successful stream and conclude for the day. Narrative element table entity, where T is narrative element base. Oh, look at you. Let's just keep all of that. Save all of these files. And it looks like it may have fixed the angry code. There's save async. The grump code is gone. It looks like this is going to do the trick for us. Sweet. So I'm going to just 86 these guys. Bye. Save. Blammo. Parent location ID and parent narrative ID fields. Can have both parent types. Beautiful. And those should be nullable. They are. Good. That's a thing of beauty. Good stuff. Thank you very much. Smiley face. Not for now. I'll be back later. So what I'm going to do, if I have time between now and the next session, excuse me, get the test scripts scaffolded for, well, no. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to scaffold test classes, or test scripts rather, for probably world and settlement for both load and list. Load and list? Yeah, probably. Or yeah, I think I'll do load and filter for world and settlement, so that I can get the access methods for those implemented in the location access. And then we'll need, what else is not yet implemented? Delete. We're going to need to implement delete. Yeah. So we still need to implement delete, filter, and load. So tomorrow, I'm going to try to get myself to the point where I've got load ready. I'm going to implement a very basic form of filtered, where it just filters by the author user ID and returns an enumerable collection of this filtered game content result, which is really just a subset of the properties that exist on all of these content objects, including the ID, the name. Author is going to be a little trickier to look up because I don't have direct access to the user table here. But I might just set up a, hey, this is the name of the user table, go query the information you need from it. But yeah. Okay. So, I've had a pretty productive session this time around, and I'm going to checkpoint. Point of interest, implement Azure Table Storage access for game content models, narrative element converters, location access class, all kinds of stuff in here. And this is a gigantic commit because this is just sort of, this is the first kick at the detailed design. So I'm going to publish this off to my GitHub. And I'm going to say thank you for joining me and thanks for hanging out. And until next time, happy coding. Take care, folks.